earlier, we're talking about President Cyril Ramaphosa delivering the eulogy at the State Memorial Service for F.W. de Klerk, the last apartheid president. That event happened at the Groote Kerk in Cape Town this afternoon. Ramaphosa said that de Klerk played a pivotal role in getting South Africa to where it is today. Let's reflect more on the memorial and the backlash that government has received for holding a service for de Klerk. We're joined tonight by Judith February, a visiting fellow at Wits School of Governance, and political analyst Asanda Ngwasheng. My thanks to you both. Welcome to News at Prime. Judith, let me begin with you. Did Ramaphosa have to walk a tight rope this morning when he delivered the eulogy?
Good evening, Thembekile. I think, yes, he did, because, of course, the holding of a state memorial service for former President de Klerk was, as you said in your introduction, it's contentious. And as Minister in the Presidency, Mondli Gungubela, also said at the memorial service today, is that the past is always with us, and the past is with us in different ways. It's with us in the deep inequalities that we see. It's with us in the deep levels of violence that are prevalent in our society, and also the psychological trauma of a country that hasn't fully resolved its past. And so this was always going to be a controversial day, and it's not surprising that there are many different viewpoints. But as Minister Gungubela also said, this is a robust democracy, and equally you had people who were attempting to protest outside, who were in fact protesting, and inside what happened was what I think the state did. Dignified memorial for actor. I think the president was right when he said, we don't have to all agree on the past with what former President Klerk did or didn't do, and that's a sort of separate conversation. But there is something about a passing of a baton in a baton, in a sense. And it reminded me, yesterday, then when Angela Merkel was passing the baton to the new Chancellor of Germany, and there was a sort of an elbow bump, and there was the handing over of flowers and then moving forward. Now, obviously, that's a very, very different scenario, but I think we can learn from that. But of course, the past is with us. Apartheid prosecutions, for example, the democratic government has been neglectful of that, and people have had their voices heard. We've seen the family of Imam Haroon, for example, Ahmed Timol, and this continues we take that detritus with us if we don't deal with it. And the interesting point as well, Thembekile, is that, the president talked a lot about this Center for Forgiveness in Gorée Island. And it's a very interesting idea. And but, you can only have forgiveness if you have a proper reckoning with what has happened in the past. And we obviously haven't had that. And that is unfortunate. And we carry it with us.
Asanda, let me come to you. Listening to the president speak today, he was trying to capture the negative from the apartheid era and the role played by F.W. de Klerk in the period just up to 1994. Did he do a good enough job to capture both sides of the man?
I think it was a very difficult one, and it would have been a very difficult one for any president or any person who was in the position that Cyril Ramaphosa was in, because you have to kind of hold the role of being a leader of the state and kind of do the things that are required because of that, like having to give a state eulogy to somebody like former President F.W. de Klerk. But there is the reality that South Africans still have not received the justice that they seek, that there are families who still don't know what happened to them, and F.W. de Klerk could have done a lot during, while he was still alive, to give those people some peace, to tell them what happened to their relatives, and to reveal some of the truths that the families have been asking for. And in failing to do that, he actually, I believe, tainted his own legacy, because he had the opportunity to give that information and put people at peace. He had the opportunity to admit that apartheid was a crime against humanity, and to admit that the legacy of apartheid continues and is going to continue in perpetuity if we don't do more to deal with inequality, if we don't do more to acknowledge the pain and the hurt that Black people to this day still face. Because remember, whether you're looking at what happened in 1980, what happened in 1960, what happened in any era of South Africa, the pain of black people is ever present and continues to be, even in 2021. And it continues to be denied in part because people like F.W. de Klerk did not come out and speak the honest truth, which is that they built a system, him, his ancestors, and some of his friends and buddies, they built a system that continues to hurt people, even people who have not had any dealings with the apartheid state, who were born free, so-called born frees, are still, carrying the yoke of the system of apartheid. And so there is no way to give a positive or a balanced state of, memorial for somebody like F.W. de Klerk, because yes, great, he did unban. Yes, great, he did take some steps, but what was the motivation behind those steps? It wasn't a moral goodness. It wasn't a change of heart. It was purely a financial decision. Apartheid simply was not economically viable anymore. And there was a need to open up the space, and there was a need to, be able to make more money outside of South Africa and be able to compete internationally in sports, etc., etc. And so it was never about giving black people freedom. It was never about giving black people the peace and the justice that they still seek and that evade us as black people to this day. And so if it was a case where we were talking about somebody who actually, did speak the truth about some of the atrocities that he was part of, if he did kind of have some sense of remorse and express it before waiting until he was literally dead to actually start talking about an apology that people, by the way, have been asking for almost 30 years. And he missed a huge opportunity. And I personally blame him for the difficulty that black people still face trying to talk about the reality of racism and the fact that it exists.
Okay.
And I blame him personally for allowing the denial of racism and its atrocities to continue to be denied. Because had he spoken much earlier, more could have been done.
So we're almost out of time, but I want to bring up another topic that's got people speaking. Former President Jacob Zuma has been a massive newsmaker this year. When you can go back to his various court appearances, the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, ultimately sentenced to prison time for contempt of court, Asanda, and now a new book titled Jacob Zuma Speaks. His daughter says it's one of a series of writings. Do you expect that to be a page-turner that moves us forward in any way in understanding the man and his time in office and everything post his presidency?
No, I don't think that it's going to reveal anything that we don't already know. I think that Jacob Zuma is like a never-ending nightmare where you keep wanting somebody to wake you up and tell you that it was a dream and that you're back to reality. And I think that he actually is in denial about the detrimental effect that he's had, not only on our country in terms of the kind of things he implemented as a president, but also on our psyche and his constant inability to read the room and know that this is not a good time to be doing things like releasing books when you're supposed to be on medical parole, when you're supposed to be on your deathbed. These are not the signs of a man who is on his way to death. These are the signs of a man who is trying to fight back. And that is a big problem, considering that we know that it was very dodgy, even the way he managed to get that medical parole in the first place. And we saw what he did in KZN with the looting, and we saw what he's done ever since he's been under threat of being arrested. And I think that it's really unfair that he continues to drag us and continues to kind of dig at old and painful wounds that he has caused over 10 years of incompetence, over 10 years of corruption, and over 10 years of just generally abusing power at every single point and not caring at all about South Africans and the impact that all this was having. And if you think about the state of our economy right now and the fact that we're in COVID, we can't afford the kind of dragging that Jacob Zuma is taking us yet again through.
And Judith, this book comes but about a month before we find out, or at least before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry hands over its final report to the president, right? Jacob Zuma, we know, was eventually sentenced because he would not cooperate with the state capture hearing process. Do you think a single book or a series of books at this stage can change the story of the Zuma legacy in South Africa in that context and broadly?
Tabakile, I think the book is a non-event. The book is just more of Jacob Zuma, the same playbook that we've seen during his time in office and also afterwards when he's been trying to evade being held to account for fraud and corruption. And so I do think that we possibly paid far too much attention because it is a hatchet job. It was always going to be. And so I think we need to focus far less on the personality and the drama and the sort of theatrics, the politics of theatre that surrounds Jacob Zuma. He and those he represents in the form of the radical economic transformers within the ANC are a clear and present danger to our democracy. We saw that during the insurrection in July. We saw the violence that came from that. And we also saw that nobody as yet has been prosecuted by the NPA. We've seen a consistent undermining of the rule of law by former President Zuma. And so I think we tend to see him in these sorts of parodies. You know, here's somebody launching a book, etc., and there are all these jokes and memes about it. But actually, this is somebody who, as I said, is a clear and present danger to our democracy. We need to be looking far more carefully at the political forces in South Africa and the balance of forces within the ANC, and that our democracy, as we end 2021 and as we look ahead, as we wait for the Zondo Commission report, but also as we've celebrated 25 years of the signing of the final constitution, our constitutional order is under threat. It is happening with the public appointment of Parliament, the dubious appointment, Judge President in the West. We need to start connecting the dots and to see how all of these instances come together to fundamentally undermine our democracy. And I think if we've learned anything in 2021, it is that protecting and defending democracy is all of our work. We can't look to the ANC. We can't look to the politicians who were at sixes and sevens, our secure intelligence services who failed us in July, who stood back and either watched the looting happen and didn't do anything or were too afraid to do anything. If we're going to save our democracy and defend it and protect it, it's up to all of us to start doing the work of democracy, and that is citizen action. And that's what 2022 has got to be about.
Judith February and Asanda Washington, good to speak to you both. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for your time.